The patch shown in this video is designed as a true assistant to facilitate automatic arpeggio playing for a user who is not fully versed in keyboard playing technique. The download link for the VCV file is provided in the description. The arpeggios produced by the patch are controlled by the keys of an external MIDI keyboard, but the patch can also work with a computer keyboard. Before delving into the patch's functionality and usage, let's first look at some arpeggios it can produce. The patch is built around stochastic telegraph's basically module and is inspired by the easy chords technique found on some hardware arrangers. This trick allows, by pressing a single key on the external MIDI keyboard, to automatically trigger the triad corresponding to the major chord whose root note is the played note. Similarly, by simultaneously pressing any key to the left of the root key, you obtain the triad corresponding to the minor chord. The notes of the selected major or minor chord will automatically play, over several octaves, the arpeggio previously chosen by the user. Various arpeggio patterns are already available in the patch in a template bank. But, as we'll see later, the user has plenty of time to memorize their own arpeggio patterns. To visualize the keys pressed on the MIDI keyboard, a virtual keyboard has been integrated into the patch. This virtual keyboard serves only a monitoring function and is not involved in the patch's actual operation. Alongside this virtual keyboard, there are also two modules which, when running, display the notes of the arpeggio and the corresponding chord. On this subject, it should now be noted that a through module, from the 6+1 collection, provides two outputs to which the volt per octave inputs of the synthesizer voices chosen for the arpeggiated notes and chords will be patched. Similarly, two outputs can be patched to the gate inputs controlling the envelopes of these two voices. Each arpeggio structure can contain up to 8 notes. An arpeggio structure is created simply by activating or deactivating the buttons in the arpeggio grid. The arpeggio notes will be played successively from the first column to the last column with an activated button. If you want to start from a blank grid, simply reset the grid via the context menu of Arpeggio Switch 88 module. Let's take the example of a 3-note arpeggio composed of the third of the chord's root, and the fifth of the chord's root. To do this, in the first column of the grid, click on the button for the penultimate row. In the second column, click on the button for the last row. Finally, in the third column, click on the button for the antepenultimate row. We need to tell basically the number of notes in the arpeggio by setting the desired value using the dedicated slider. Note that, for each arpeggio, the number of notes played by the patch will be strictly equal to the number of steps displayed in settings, regardless of the length of the arpeggio entered in the grid. As soon as any key on the MIDI keyboard is pressed, the notes of the arpeggio programmed in the grid are played by the patch. These notes obviously depend on the chord corresponding to the pressed keys. Note that while the arpeggio is being played by the patch, the corresponding chord is also played. This chord will sound as long as the MIDI keyboard key is not released. By default, the accompaniment chords are played in their root position. In other words, the first note of the arpeggio that you hear will be the root of the chord. However, it is possible to automatically and randomly play the chords in their first or second inversion. This last choice is made by activating the dedicated button. Note that if the chords are inverted, the labels appearing on the chord grid no longer truly correspond to what you hear. In fact, root should be labeled lowest note, third would become middle note, fifth highest note, and so on for higher octaves. But, ultimately, apart from the starting note, the overall structure of the arpeggio remains unchanged. To adjust the performance tempo, we need to set the pause time between each note in the arpeggio structure. This pause time, expressed in milliseconds, is set to the desired value using the fader dedicated to this function. Note that this tempo can be modified in real time during performance. Also note that if the duration fader is set to 0, the patch will only play the chords, but no arpeggio notes will be heard. The advantage of this system is that we can play minor and major chord progressions by focusing only on their roots. The various arpeggios created can be memorized by the 8-face module. This memorization takes into account the arpeggio structure, configured by the arpeggio grid, the number of arpeggio steps, and the rest time between each note. To retrieve this configuration later, simply click on the corresponding slot. This concludes this brief presentation. Feel free to try this patch.